Well, welcome everyone. It's good to see you. We are delighted that you'll be joining us tonight for this special program titled Meet the Bookbinder, a conversation with Ramon Townsend. My name is Heather Reifer. I'm the executive director here at Historic Sugartown, and I'm here tonight with Faith McCarrick, our fantastic director of programs and outreach, and she is basically our production team for this evening, as you could probably tell. And of course, the man of the evening himself, Ramon Townsend. First, a bit of housekeeping. We will keep folks muted throughout at the beginning of the program here. You are invited to enter questions and comments into the chat throughout the program. And then there will be an open Q&A after Ramon's presentation. We'll bring up everyone's videos and unmute you. So, but we will answer the chat questions first that you enter in. So, and then we'll open it up to the rest of you. You should also be aware that we will be recording this evening's program. So if your video is on, you may end up in the recording. So again, welcome. Historic Sugartown is, if you're not familiar, a private nonprofit organization that stores 11 structures, depending on how you count them, and 9.2 acres on the outskirts of Malvern in Willistown Township, Chester County. One of those buildings is Historic Sugartown's Book Bindery. In 2000, Historic Sugartown's co-founder, the late John Nagy, who was a rare book enthusiast himself, learned that Fred and Elka Shahada had planned to retire from their book conservation business in Ardmore and sell their extensive collection of bookbinding tools. John felt deeply that this collection should not be dispersed and convinced his co-founder, Penelope P. Wilson, and Historic Sugartown's board that it should be saved and brought to Sugartown to be showcased in what is now known as the Book Bindery. When I started here in late 2012, I would have meetings with Penny Wilson to talk about Historic Sugartown's programs and initiatives. Penny just sadly passed away at the young age of 97 back in mid-February, and we will miss her dearly. She was active with Historic Sugartown right up to the week she passed on, and just 2 years ago attended three of Ramon's workshops. I think Faith might have a photograph of that to put up. At any rate, when I started, there wasn't much in the way of a program. There she is, and there's John as well. At any rate, at the time, there was not much in the way of a program calendar at Historic Sugartown. We had just transitioned to a professional organization, and we were slowly building our staff, and we hired Faith in 2014. So we were really at the ground zero and creating all our program calendar and all the things that we have going on now. In any case, Penny and I would meet every once in a while, and she always had a keen eye as to what needed to be done. During one of our meetings, she shared that we needed to get things moving in the Book Bindery. Well, it had too much potential to just be on tours. And I remember leaving that meeting thinking, I don't think I know a thing about bookbinding. How on earth am I going to do that? So, but not long after, I got my answer. And when I say it was out of the blue, nothing was closer to the truth. In April 2015, I received a flyer in the mail. This flyer right here. Found it again the other day. And it was simply addressed to Historic Sugartown. And I started looking at it, and my eyes started popping out of my head. It had words like bookbinding, workshops. I was trained at Colonial Williamsburg. And finally, I'm located in Exton. Well, as I'm reaching for the telephone, that was my next move. By the end of the week, I was meeting Ramon Townsend in the Book Bindery. And that was the beginning of our workshop program here at Sugartown. By June that year, Ramon was teaching our staff and volunteers how to bind books and had his first workshop planned for Sugartown that summer. And I found another thing that Ramon's not aware of. I found another email that Ramon had sent me that summer after we had the guide training. And I had written to him and said, I'm so glad we're so excited about our training and program opportunities. Thank you for being so generous of your time and skills. And I get this response from Ramon. Heather, I agree wholeheartedly. Stealing a line from one of my top 5 movies, this looks like the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I've dedicated my entire life to the book arts. Demonstrating and preserving them are big on my agenda, and Sugartown presents the ideal venue to achieve that goal. I'm looking forward to working with you and your staff. So with that, that was the beginning, and we have come a long way since then, with 30 workshops a year, now virtual workshops and so on. And we'll let Ramon talk about that. But before we turn things over to him, since we're not able to be in the book bindery tonight, we have some nice pictures behind us, but that's all we can do right now. But we wanted to bring the bindery to you through a short video. The video was initially created last summer by the Chester County Planning Commission for the Chester County Town Tours and Village Walks. And Faith has adapted it just for the book bindery. And it's now narrated by one of Historic Sugartown's guides, Deborah Quitterovich Hoover. And she's here tonight, I think. And when the video is over, Ramon will greet you and begin his presentation. Thank you again. And again, please enter any questions you have throughout the evening in the chat, and we will get to them in the Q&A. Thank you. And here's the video.
Historic Sugartown's book bindery was completed in 2002. The book bindery showcases a world-class collection of over 2,500 bookbinding tools and machinery that once belonged to master bookbinder Fred Shahada. After serving in World War II, Shahada apprenticed with a German bookbinder in Bremerhaven, Germany. When he and his wife Elke, the daughter of this German bookbinder, returned to the United States, they opened a book bindery in Ardmore, Pennsylvania. Together, they repaired as many as 200 to 300 books a year for collectors, book dealers, and libraries. They were internationally respected for their work, conserving such works as John Audubon's original prints, the Federalist Papers, and broadsides announcing the Declaration of Independence. The collection in the bindery features many early and rare brass tools, including decorative palettes, fillets, and decorative rolls, with examples by makers from the United States, England, and France. The collection includes multiple examples of rare early tools crafted by Philadelphia toolmakers. Bookbinding tool scholar Steve Bieri regards the Shahada collection as the largest in the country in terms of signed 19th century Philadelphia tools. Today, local bookbinder Ramon Townsend and his team of colonialbindery.com teach a variety of workshops in our book bindery. Courses range from an introduction to the traditional craft of bookbinding to book restoration, book sewing, paper marbling, scarf marbling, and gold tooling. We typically offer about 30 workshops a year.
So Ramon, take it away whenever you are ready.
Okay, thank you so much, Heather and Faith, or as I sometimes say mistakenly, Feather and Haith. And welcome to what I call my Peter Pan room, because whenever I'm in here, I feel like I'm a 19-year-old kid again walking into the book bindery at Colonial Williamsburg. That's how I felt the first day I walked in here, and I feel like that every time I come in here. It's a great place to be. So what we're going to do is have a little journey for about half an hour or so. I'll talk to you about how I became a bookbinder, my experience as a bookbinder, and also basically some things about the craft, and then about the program that we have here at Historic Sugartown. I see quite a few familiar faces and names, including my sister and my brothers, Mark and Greg and Beth. And I told them that if they didn't join us tonight, I was going to tell our mom on them. And you don't want to mess with our mom. She's 94, but she still carries a big stick. So glad you guys could make it. Okay, so let's start with this this first slide. Basically, what this is, I call this the 18th century bookbinder's survival guide to the 21st century because, you know, I won't say it's a dying craft, but it's not as prevalent as it used to be, and so we have to come up with some very innovative ways to keep it alive, keep it going. So the illustration you see here on the screen is from Diderot's Encyclopedia, and I say circa 1751, but that's really not accurate. Diderot was a member of the French Enlightenment, and he decided that his contribution to the Enlightenment was to create an encyclopedia that would prove that the average person was more important than the royalty. So what he did was he spent about 30 years, maybe started around 1751, but didn't really finish until the 1780s, walking around France, collecting information about every single craft in France. And then he created an encyclopedia. It's a 12-volume set. They're absolutely beautiful. I've seen a few of them. They're gorgeous leather-bound books. So this is an illustration, one of the illustrations out of the bookbinding section. And let me explain to you what you're seeing. So for example, the gentleman on the far right by the window is pounding signatures. You may or may not be familiar with book terminology. This is what we call a signature. When Gutenberg invented printing in 1450 thereabouts, that was also a 30-year experience. He started in 1420 and didn't finish till about 1450. But when he invented printing, he printed folios, which was a page here, printed a page here and there. And then that was folded into a book section. Over time, they learned that they could print multiple pages. This is called an octavo. It's 16 pages on a section. And that can then be folded down. And then you have the book section. That gentleman in the picture is pounding the signatures because the fold is thicker. The folds are thicker than the rest of the book, the pages. So he has to pound them with a hammer in order to get the folds equal to the rest of the pages. They're then pressed for a day afterwards. To his left, where it says the letter B, there's a woman who's sewing. She's sewing at a sewing frame. So the books were all hand sewn in order to, that's the only way to do it in those days. And they were sewn to cords, similar to what we have in this book here, where the book sections are sewn on the sewing frame to cords. Those cords end up in the back of the book eventually. This is a book, this is a copy of Thomas Hardy's Tom Jones from 1749. And you see the ridging, there's a ridging along the back of it. And that ridging is the cord showing through the spine of the book. So that's what she's doing. She's sewing book sections. Took about, maybe an hour to sew maybe 10 books at the time. Very slow process. To her left is a gentleman who was cutting the edges of the pages. This is before the guillotine was invented. So you had what was called the press and the plow that you would use to trim the edges of the pages. Basically, you're planing the edges of the pages in order to get them smooth and also to cut out the folds. And then lastly, at the far right, the gentleman is operating a book press. He's pressing all the books. The leather they've been bound in leather. He's pressing them down so that they can dry flat. And it takes about 24 hours to dry. So that's just a brief explanation about what we're seeing in the illustration. All right, next slide, Faith. Okay, learning the trade. So I'll give you a little bit of background. When I was 14, 15 years old, I got my working papers. We lived in Rochester, New York, and I got a job working for J.C. Penney. And I started out working as a stock boy. And what I did was I would obviously stock the shelves, but in addition, I learned how to print the cards that you would find in the shop, like men's jewelry on sale, or I should say women's jewelry on sale, or men have jewelry too, or men's shoes on sale, things like that. And what we have in the back room, the stock room, there was a little press set up. We set the type, ink the type, put a cardstock on it, and roll a rubber roller over it, and then that would make the sign. So I knew how to print. I then went to college at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. And one of my fellow dorm mates told me if I was looking for a job, and he said, well, you can get a job at Colonial Williamsburg, which I didn't even know what it was. I never even heard of it before. So they helped me, and I went down to the employment office, and I filled out an application. And I happened to put at the very bottom of the application, I know how to set type. So the lady said to me, you know how to set type? Well, let me take you over to the master printer. I walked over to the master printer. His name was Mike. And she said, I have a nice young man here, and he knows how to set type. Would you hire him? And he said, sure, I'll take him on. So I started out in the print shop, which was very, very fortunate. My brother Greg was at William and Mary at the same time. And he also applied for a job at Colonial Williamsburg. And he got a job, I think it was as a busboy in one of the restaurants, and which is what usually happened to the students. If you were an art student, you might get a job in the craft shop, or if you're a musician or you were a singer, you might get a job at the governor's palace, something like that, singing or dancing. But for average guys like us, we were usually turned into busboys, or maybe a waiter, maybe picking up trash. But I got lucky, I got a job in the print shop. And I started out in the print shop, and I really enjoyed it. But after maybe 6 months or so, I realized I really wanted to be a bookbinder. So the print shop and the bookbindery we were one big family. We knew one another. So I decided, well, let me see if I can go into the bookbindery. So I asked the master printer if I could asked the master bookbinder if I could work in the bookbindery. And he said, sure, you can talk to him. So I went over and talked to the master bookbinder, and he said, sure. Well, again, we all knew one another, and we were all family, so that was not a problem. So I transferred over to the bookbinder. And I will say, even though I was only 19 years old, I did realize at that time, this printing thing, I probably can't do this at home after I leave William and Mary and after I leave Colonial Williamsburg. But bookbinding, we have an expression in bookbinding, you can bookbind in a closet. I can always do bookbinding somewhere, and I can teach it to my kids. And now that I'm a grandfather, I can teach it to my grandson. So I was kind of, looking into the future, and realized, this bookbinding thing I can carry with me for the rest of my life, which is exactly what happened. So that's where I started. That's how I started in the bookbindery. What I did for, it seems like months, maybe it was just several weeks, but I also think it might be several months. I folded paper. I stood in the back. I listened to the master bookbinder and the journeyman and the apprentice, and I watched what they did, and I listened to the interpretation of the room, so that after several weeks or several months, I basically knew the interpretation, and I knew the entire process. It was in my brain. Now I just had to transfer that information to my hands. So I started working out what we call stitch books. Were very simple books. I made them by the hundreds and thousands. And then they graduated me up to what are called half bindings or quarter bindings, a book like this, where there's leather along the spine and then decorative paper on the rest of it. And I did that for several months, and maybe a year or so. And then eventually I got into making full leather bindings. Just a great experience. It was really the best job I ever had, working there in the shop. In fact, I recall once calling my mom and saying, Mom, I really like this bookbinding thing. It's really got a hold of me, and I'd like to quit. I like to quit college and become a full-time bookbinder, because at Colonial Williamsburg, you can do that. You can become an apprentice and a journeyman and a master and make a career out of it. A lot of people in Williamsburg do. My mom told me, and I can't tell exactly what she said in mixed company, well, actually, I probably could tell you. Our mother is Jamaican, and she told me in Jamaican patois what she thought about that idea. And so if I told you in patois, you would understand, but if you knew patois, but it was not. Basically the message was, you're going to stay in school, and I'm glad she made me do that. Okay, anyway, here on the photograph, a good friend of mine, that is still a good friend, my oldest friend. She and I, and then her husband to be, they weren't married then, they got married eventually. She took this photograph of me working. This is me working in the working the press in the printing office. I'm pulling the press so that the platen will flatten the paper onto the ink type. And then behind me, you will see the typecase with the upper and lower case. We had two presses at the shop. One was an actual working press from the 17th century, basically the same press that Gutenberg invented. It's called the Common Press. And then this press I'm working on is a replica. So I like the glasses and the hair. If for those of us who remember the Mod Squad, if Link Hayes apprenticed for Benjamin Franklin, this is what he would look like. Okay, next slide, Faith. CW is what we call Colonial Williamsburg. And again, just a great experience. They gave seminars in all the crafts and the history. We got a lot. They expected us to attend seminars in other crafts and history about other parts of the colony, so that we could have a broad understanding of what was going on in Williamsburg back in the 18th century. They brought in people from all over the world to lecture us. It was just a wonderful place to work. And so we learned a lot about other crafts and the cross-pollination of craft work. In 1981 or 82, somewhere thereabouts, Prince Charles came to Colonial Williamsburg. It was a very big deal, and all the craft shops were expected to make a presentation gift for him. So in our shop, we made two gold-tooled books, which I got to work on. So I'm very proud to say that's somewhere in one of the Queen's vaults, somewhere in Windsor Castle, maybe. There's a couple books that I worked on. Now, my goal was not to, when I went to William & Mary and got to Williamsburg, was not to become a bookbinder. That was just kismet, divine providence intervening. And I just got plain old lucky, and I guess you could say. But I was a pre-law student. I was a government major, which was pre-law. And so after I learned gold tooling, which is the hardest thing to learn in bookbinding, really, I decided to leave, and I applied to law school, and I got in. So I went to law school, and I've been practicing law in the Philadelphia area since 1987. But I never stopped the bookbinding. I just absolutely loved it. Became part of my DNA. I made books for friends. I repaired, somebody would know that I did that. I would repair books from time to time. I worked on my own books at home. And so I just kept my hands in it. And then again, as I mentioned, later on, once I started having kids and they got old enough, I was able to teach the craft to my children as well. Here in this illustration, she is working the sewing frame. And this is what I mean about cross-pollination. So, you know, craft work isn't, crafts build on one another. They borrow or steal from each other. In this case, a sewing frame is really a loom. I think what happened was, well, when the Romans invented bookbinding in the 1st century, they didn't use a sewing frame. They sewed off of a sewing frame. They hadn't been invented. But I think what happened was one day a bookbinder somewhere was walking past a loom and said, I can use that for bookbinding. And so they adapted the loom to this, because the cords that are up, the vertical cords you see in the picture are would be the warp, and then the weft would be the thread that's going through the signatures, and then the shuttle is their left hand and right hand passing the needle back and forth. So again, one craft builds on another, and that's how we improve over time. Okay, Faith, go ahead. So in 2012, Danielle, you see her picture there, came to me and said, Dad, what will you do when you retire from practicing law? I had never really thought about it, but I told her, well, I'll always be a bookbinder. And then she said, well, all these years you've been a bookbinder, but you never made any money at it. Why don't we start a business and start charging people? And I said, you know, Papa didn't raise no dummy. So we started Colonial Bindery. where we really, the thought was I was going to make blank books and sell blank books, because at Colonial Williamsburg, we made a ton of blank books and they sold like hotcakes. If you've been there, there's a post office on the first floor, and we would sell books and marble paper and things like that in the post office up on the main street where Duke of Gloucester Street is. So I thought that was going to be a no-brainer, that I would sell a lot of blank books. But it turned out that really it was the workshops and repairing used and rare books. So, for example, again, using this this Tom Jones. This is a book from 1749. It's in still pretty good shape, but I had to rehinge it in here. So I get a lot of 18th century and 19th century books, but this is pretty typical. Here's another good example. This is a book from the mid 1800s, and the boards are off. Okay, we get books like this all the time, and it's also missing the spine. And it's been a very, very lucrative and interesting business where I get to repair books 18th, 19th century, 17th century every now and then. And of course, a lot of 20th century books. We get a lot of Bibles, a ton of Bibles. That is probably 60% of our business, is repairing both family Bibles and personal Bibles. So really, we started out with the repair end of it. And that is, Heather mentioned at the outset, I started sending out flyers to different history museums, historic sites, bookstores, and thankfully, in 2015, one landed on Sugartown's desk. Actually, I will give credit to Danielle. Danielle told me about Sugartown a few years before. She said, someone told me there's a book bindery in Malvern, Pennsylvania. And I told her, yeah, right, Danielle, I don't believe you for a second. If I listened to her and looked it up, I would have made that connection probably in 2012. And as I said, this bindery is just as equal to at least what we had at Colonial Williamsburg. And it's been this relationship with Sugartown has just been very, very wonderful. We do a few other workshops. We do I probably spend about 40 Saturdays a year in a workshop, but a good 30 to 35 right here at Sugartown. So that photograph is Danielle in her costume. That's actually made by a guy in Ohio whose name is Townsend, but I don't believe he's any relationship to us. And then that's me, and the other photograph is me at West Chester University, near here, but maybe 15 minutes away. And I'm holding, and they have a very nice rare book collection, and I'm holding a Shakespeare first folio. After Shakespeare died, a few years after he died, they started printing up all of the copies of his plays. I think the first one maybe was in 1620 and somewhere in there. And there were 4 editions that were printed throughout the 17th century. West Chester University actually, and this may be unique for West Chester University, they actually have one of each printing. And I went over to the West Chester University to see their collection, and they gave me this photo op here where I was able to hold a Shakespeare first folio and get my picture taken. So that's a pretty big moment. I was very proud of that moment in that photograph. All right, so next what we're going to do is talk to you about the workshops that we perform here at Sugartown. We do about 9 or 10 different workshops here. We stay busy. Introduction to marbling, the one in the top left, where if you don't know marbling, in the tray there's a liquid called carrageenan, Irish moss. It's a seaweed that is boiled and turned into a liquid base that's a syrup, and that's heavy enough to carry watercolors. And then we sprinkle the watercolors on the surface, and then we have to prepare the paper as well. And we can using these combs, we can make different designs, and the paint will adhere to the paper. So that's one of our first, that's really often the introductory workshop. A lot of people come and take the marbling first. Then below that is what we call historical patterns marbling. It's a little bit more intense, where you actually will make the paints, their watercolors that we will show you how you grind them and prepare them for marbling. And there's some other different marbling techniques involved. That's a great class. Then in the middle is introduction to bookbinding. So a lot of folks again will take introduction to marbling. They'll make about 30 marble papers. They'll come back and take introduction to bookbinding, where they'll make the quarter bindings, and then they put the marble papers on the covers. And then right below that is tooling, which we're going to talk about in a minute, where we teach you how to use the various tools we have here in the shop to design the leather. And then to the far left is bookbinding 2. Introduction to bookbinding is a prerequisite for bookbinding 2, where you'll make a fully leather-bound book. And then again, if you have marble paper, or if you have marble paper from your own workshop, or we have the marble paper here, then you can use marble, apply marble end papers to your book. Okay, Faith, go ahead. So what we're going to do next is a quick tooling demonstration. So I'm going to hopefully be able to give you 2 demonstrations of tooling. The first one will be with gold foil. And this is really what most of us do nowadays. We tool leather with gold foil. It has a backing, and and that's going to transfer the gold here to the leather. All right, let me just get a tool. So the tools are heated to 225 degrees. And then we cool them down, actually. If they're too hot, they'll burn the leather. I can touch it, it's hot. I've never been burned. I've never seen a bookbinder get burned by the tools. I mean, they sting you a little bit when you touch it, but I've never seen anybody get burned. But what we need to do is we need to actually cool it down so it doesn't burn the leather. And we know when it gets to a very low sizzle, that's when we know it's ready. I have no idea what the temperature is. But the sound tells me that it's ready. That's almost there. Okay, all right. Gold foil is very simple, easy to work with. Okay, and then a combination of heat and pressure result in the transfer. There we go. I don't know if you can see that. Let me turn it around. So this is a stamp that we bought. We had made for us a couple weeks ago, and it's the Book Bindery had historic Sugartown. Hopefully you can see that. I like the way that came out. That came out great. Okay. Now I'm going to show you another tooling method, which is a lot more difficult because it's working with gold leaf. So when you work with gold leaf, what you do is you apply a glue to the leather. The glue is this stuff. This is a combination of 1 egg white and a teaspoon of vinegar. We call it glare. And the glare is the clear stuff that's at the very bottom here. What we do is you just get a little bit of glare. And I've already pre-stamped this. When you do gold tooling, you want to make an impression what we call blind, where you cannot see, where there's no precious metal involved. We then apply the glare, just kind of lay it into the design. Now, usually that has to sit for a little while. I did the rest of this earlier this afternoon. That's already dry. We want the glare to be basically dry. We then put a little bit of Vaseline on that. The Vaseline is going to hold the gold leaf in place. That's a small amount of Vaseline. Okay. This is the gold leaf. It's 24 karat gold. One second. There you go. Gold leaf is very temperamental. It doesn't like humidity. All right, nobody breathe. Everybody stop breathing. I'm going to do a double layer. Okay. So I can just barely see. What you do is you put a little bit of the grease from your head and you can move the gold around. The grease from your forehead will pick up the gold. So I can just barely see that. Since the gold is so thin, it's 7/7 of an inch thick. So it's really inside the design. I can see the gold. I can see the design through the gold. Now I'm going to bring my tool over. All right, so this is the tool I'm going to use for this one. Again, you cool it down. It's overheated, and then you cool it down. Now, usually what happens when you work with gold, it doesn't all stick the first time. Generally, you have to tool a couple times. You tool it, and then you have to add more gold and retool it. Since I can see the design, what I try to do is I just try to get the tool on one side of this. I'm going to try to get this right side directly in the impression I already have. So I mentioned the glare. This glue here has egg white in it. So what has happened is the egg white has cooked from the heat. That hardens, and then it holds the gold in place. All right. So usually that's what happens. You don't get it all in the first time. You have to go back in another 2 or 3 times to apply more glare, going 2 or 3 more times before I get the final impression. All right. So that's a little demonstration about how we do the gold tooling. Okay, Faith. All right, next slide, Faith. So about a year ago, of course, the pandemic hit and we had to shut down all of our in-person workshops. And it didn't take Faith and Heather and myself long to figure out, okay, we need to pivot and create a remote or virtual workshop program. And we did that pretty quickly. I went home and I developed a sort of an outline for it. And then I practiced with the kids. I would have Danielle in a separate room. I was in one room. I had a camera, and we did book restoration to begin with. And after practicing with Danielle a couple of times remotely, then I came here to the shop, and then we practiced with some of the volunteers and did that a few more times. And by June, we had a fully developed book restoration program, where what we do is we mail out to the participants, and we've had participants from all over the country. We mail out to them what they will need to repair the book, and including the book itself. We mail them book and a lot of other materials. They'll have scissors and other things at home. We don't need to mail that to them. We mail to them the necessary things, and that has gone very, very well. And then after that, we developed a introduction to bookbinding remote workshop. And then we are now working, a book sewing, where we teach you how to do what's called a herringbone stitch, a double needle Coptic stitch, and a French link stitch. And now we're also starting up a bookbinding 2 workshop, where you will learn where the participants will learn how to make a full leather binding. And then, of course, we taught folks how to marble masks. The kids love that one. Okay, Faith. White paw. So I because of the pandemic, I was locked at home quite a bit. So I was sewing a lot more at home. And we have a cat. We have two cats. One has 4 white paws, and his sister has 4 black paws. So we call them White Paw and Black Paw. And White Paw loves to play with the cords and the thread when we're sewing. And what happened this morning was pretty much exemplified what White Paw does to us, because we like to sew in the mornings. It's very relaxing and peaceful. So it's a great thing to do. And what happened this morning is very example of what White Paw can do. So Danielle was sewing, and she walked away briefly and went to the kitchen. And as soon as you leave, that's when White Paw attacks the sewing frame. And if you just watch for about 20 more seconds, you'll see what happened this morning. I posted this to Instagram, and I think he's got over 2,000 views by now. I think we have like 300 likes, which never happens to us on Instagram. So he realized what he'd done and he got out of there. Okay, thanks, Faith. And then just a few more things here. So we share in the trade where we do presentations. Faith and Danielle and myself, but mainly Faith and Danielle, created a PowerPoint called "The Way Books Are Bound." And what we do is we take you from Mesopotamian clay tablets written in cuneiform by the Sumerians, in 3000 BC, up to the Romans, invention of bookbinding in the 1st century, then Gutenberg, and up to the modern times. It's about a 45-minute presentation. We created a DVD of the Bookbinding 1 class as well. So if anybody who takes 3 classes with us, they get that DVD. On the far right, we do fountain pen shows. There are fountain pen shows in about 10 cities throughout the country every year. The first one's in January in Philadelphia, and it goes around and around in a circuit. So we sell our blank books at the fountain pen shows. They do very, very well. That's what Danielle was sewing. Danielle was sewing blank books this morning for an upcoming show. Okay, go ahead, Faith. All right.
So thank you so much, Ramon. That was so wonderful to see everything. And I mean, I get to see it ahead of time, but it's always so wonderful to hear all the stories and things like that. It's just, you're a delight to work with, you and Danielle, and we're so lucky to have you at Sugartown here. So we have you for a few more minutes, everyone, and we're going to invite you all to open your videos and unmute yourselves so we can have a live Q&A. So we're really excited about that. And what we're going to do first is we're going to, Heather and I are going to be monitoring the written chat so we can get some of those questions answered. And then if anyone has anything else, we'll just, we can yell them out, and we'll keep going from there. So I think I can invite you all to unmute yourselves. So I'm going to ask you all to unmute yourselves. Of course, you don't have to if you don't want to. And then you can also bring your video live as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close down. No, actually, I'll leave up the presentation in case people have questions about some of the images that we're looking at. That Ramon saw throughout the entire presentation. And also I wanted to make sure that everyone has his contact info, which is on the slide that you see right now. I actually see that someone asked for your Instagram handle in the chat, so I'm just gonna copy that one into the chat as well. But let's look at some of these questions. Let's see. So it looks like Jack had some questions when we were doing the gold leaf demonstration. So Ramon, Jack asks, what did bookbinders use before the invention of Vaseline when gold leafing a book?
It would take Jack to ask me that question. Only Jack could ask that question. Thanks, Jack. Put me on the spot.
Bear grease.
Sweet almond oil, Jack. There, Jack.
Sweet almond oil. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then his second question tying with that was, why is the tool heated so high only to be cooled down before use? Is there a reason for that high temperature first?
I think it's because it's hard to get it exactly to that sizzle temperature, that almost stop sizzling temperature. So we found it. I think I've asked that question myself, and the only answer I've been able to come up with is that it's simpler or easier to overheat it, cool it down to when it's just done sizzling. What some bookbinders do is they'll actually drop water on it, and when the water, when they drop water and when the water just stops evaporating, that's when they know it's just the right temperature. That's the only explanation I have for it, Jack.
Okay.
Very
What did they
cool.
use before hot plates?
Well, before OSHA showed up, it was hot coal. Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, on top of that, I think if you go into the bindery, for those of you who have been there, some of the older tools have burn marks around the wooden edges. So they stuck that thing right in the fire. They got that really hot by the coals, and yeah, exactly. That's, you can see it on Ramon's tool there. So I don't want to jump ahead and stop anyone from asking any questions that they have. So does anyone want to call out any questions? Otherwise, I did preempt this and had some burning questions of my own. So,
Boy.
So I'm giving everybody a chance. Any siblings want to call out Ramon? Something, you.
No, not my brothers and sisters.
Yes.
No.
I think
Beth
Beth
trying to be
raised her
recognized.
hand. Beth, did you raise your hand? Do you have a question?
Yes. So I work with kids who are, they're high schoolers, and, oftentimes kids just don't know what to do, like, for a living, and not everybody's going to be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. And I was wondering, what is your advice to students who might be considering, a craft like this as a potential career option?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, strictly from a monetary, financial, economic perspective, you can make money doing this work. There are quite a few bookbinders. I mean, I have my other career as a lawyer, so I don't have to do this for a living. But if I actually decide to stop practicing law and concentrate full time on bookbinding and book repair, I could supplement my income very, very well. So if you wanted to tell them, you could tell them, listen, if you just want to make enough money to buy a decent car and live in a decent house, something like this actually is a viable option. There are no end of books. I am swamped with books, swamped. I must do 4 of those big, heavy family Bibles a month. Right here, I brought 10 books that I'm working on that I have to go tool that are due this month. Probably this month, I did 15 volumes of George Washington's letters this month. They're printed at about 1900. There's no end to book repair. And then the workshops do fabulously well.
Ramon, I still have that German Bible I've been schlepping around for 40 years that I need you to redo.
I'll see you in a few weeks. Give it to me then.
So we have a couple questions that have come up in the chat as well. Jennifer asks, what is your favorite tool in the bindery?
Oh, it really, I tell you, I'm so proud of this historic Sugartown tool. Can you see that? We had this was just made for us, and it's just been wonderful. But I will say, before this, I'd love this. This is a fillet. I don't know if you can see it. A fillet is the wheel. You run it across the leather by holding it at your shoulder, and you run it. And I just love the design on this one. I don't know if you can see it or not.
If you want to hold it closer to the iPad, we might be able to see it. There you go.
Is that out of frame, in frame? But I tell you,
more over your book, over your, I'm sorry, more over your there. Oh,
is that it? There you go. But we have what, 2,000, 3,000 tools here. It's hard to pick just one.
It is hard to pick just one.
I just changed my background photo so you could see a little bit of the collection of just fillets we have at Historic Sugartown.
Oh yeah, we have a ton of fillets. So Michael asks, have you done tree calf and marbled calf bindings, and how is that done? And does the process use acid like I've heard? It
does. I've never done it myself, but you're absolutely right. That's a great question. What you would do is this. So this was a typical tree calf. Shall I put it here, Faith? Right here?
Yes, that works.
This would be a typical tree calf binding, where they'd be bound in brown calfskin like this. and then they would drip some, I think it might be sulfuric acid. I believe it's sulfuric acid. I've never done it myself. And it kind of spreads, and they call it tree cap because it ends up looking like a tree. Very cool.
A lot of people on this thing.
Mark, we can hear you.
Sorry.
Anybody else?
So I'm seeing another question. What is the youngest age that is able to bookbind? When you do repairs, does it affect okay, so that's one question. So what, I guess, I think well, I can sort of answer that. We usually do 14 and above for the classes, although I think we had an 9-year-old join one time with her mom.
Yeah, with the mom, yes.
So we've had them younger, and we'll sometimes do specialized workshops with younger students that are a little bit shorter, simply because the 5 to 6 hour time frame working on one project can sometimes be a little daunting depending on the age.
Of course, if there were two 18th century bindery, they would be 7 years old working in here from sun up to sundown.
So the second part of that question, though, is when you do repairs, does it affect the worn look of a vintage book?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. So a lady brought to me last week a copy of from us 1890 Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, and it was inscribed by Walt Whitman to a friend of his, and then that friend, and if you look at, if I gave you the names of these guys and you look them up on Wikipedia, you'd know them. That friend inscribed it and gave it to another friend. So it's the marble paper is this page. The fly leaf is missing. It's there. It's out. I have the book here actually, but I'm not going to bring it out. And the front cover is a little bit loose, and the leather is a little bit worn along the edges. I told her I'm not going to touch it until it gets appraised. So she called the local rare book shop in Center City and talked to their appraisers, and they told her it would be okay to have it repaired. It's not going to devalue it. So I'm going to work on it. So to answer your question, usually I do not do much rebinding. I repair books. Rebinding means you put a new leather cover on it. I pretty much refuse that. If I think I can retain the original leather, the original material in the book, that's what I do. If someone tells me they want me to rebind it, put a new cover on it, I tell them no, go find another bookbinder.
Interesting. Very cool. So I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. Does anyone have any go ahead, Richard.
Yes, I see in the back in the bindery some what look like book presses, but I'm wondering if they're actually copy presses.
I think that's exactly the same book press that I had in Williamsburg. So I would not be surprised if that's maybe late 17th century, early 18th century. I'm sorry, late 18th century, early 19th century actual book press.
So the wooden one right behind you, and then the one to the far at the far end is actually a guillotine cutter, right? The farthest one in the corner that they're seeing.
Oh yeah, that's a guillotine. Yes.
And then the metal one behind you, I believe, is also a book press.
That's a backing press. A job
backing press.
Yeah.
But you see copy presses often sold as book presses.
You do. That's a good point, Richard. Yes, true. And
this
is a book. This is a book press. And then there's the other ones. We have them here, which you call nipping presses. They're the ones that they have a wheel at the top, and you turn them. You turn them around, and the platen goes up and down. That's really called a nipping press. That is a true book press.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh boy, we have some more questions. Sounds like your program and community participation is bustling. Any advice for us bookbinders trying to inspire the same local energy, excitement in our hometowns?
Yes, I tell you, that direct mailing thing that I did was a godsend. And again, it was history museums, rare books, used bookstores. Not that there are that many left anymore. There's only a few here in Chester County. Churches. I mailed out to church. I went to they still had yellow pages in 2012. I went to the yellow pages and I mailed out hundreds of them to churches because that's where Bibles are found. Well, I'm trying to think of what other. Here in Pennsylvania, I think each town has to have a history Heather and Faith can tell me that's true. Had to have like a historical society, I believe. There are a lot of local historical societies in Pennsylvania.
Historical commissions, yeah.
I mailed out tons of those to those. That direct mail thing, it's good paper, nice pictures, the description of what you do. If you send out 1,000 of those, and it's not that expensive, if you get, you know, a 5% or 10% return, you're set. And that's exactly what happened to me.
And it's always good when you find a bindery in your backyard.
That was very, yeah, that helps too. Yeah.
John asked, what paper do you sew into your blank books?
So for the blank books that we do here in the workshop, and usually also for the pen show, the fountain pen shows, we use Southworth, which is a 100% cotton. Now, fountain pen people can be very finicky, and they like other papers, which we can also get and use. But for the basic book, we use Southworth, which you can buy at Staples. Go to Staples stationery section, and you'll find 100% cotton and 100% linen. I prefer the 100% cotton over the 100% linen. Be careful; they'll have a 25% there. Not as good. You want the 100% rag paper.
Okay. Now, we just hit 8 o'clock, and I know we said it would be 7 to 8. I just wanted to show you a few other slides to know what we have coming up. And I don't want to cut off too many questions, but Ramon, this was just so wonderful. I actually didn't even have to pull out my questions that I made up before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn those into Facebook posts. So make sure you follow us on Facebook, and I'm going to share Ramon's answers to a couple fun questions from myself on Facebook. But let me just quickly let you guys know, we just thought, since we're telling you all about the workshops, we should let you know about upcoming dates. We've got, I started with our May dates because our April dates are basically done now. We've got book restoration in May, virtual bookbinding, virtual book restoration, a couple of those versions coming up also in May. We've got our favorite introduction to bookbinding level 1 coming up in June. Virtual bookbinding level 2, which is a new one for us. So that'll be up in June as well. We are able to do some of these in person because we're following very strict safety protocols in person ones. So they're limited to 4 people. So they're again, limited to 4 people. So, you know, they go quick, but it's to keep everyone safe and do that in person. But the virtual ones also are a great opportunity when you can't reach us in person. We have French style scarf marbling in person in July, bookbinding level 1 again, bookbinding level 2, and another virtual coming up in August. So those are the, you know, next couple things coming up. You can always check out our website to see updates there. Heather's sharing the link there as well. And then we just wanted to make sure everybody knew about, if you're local, tours are resuming in May. We've got limited village tours, but you can come and see the bindery in person. From May through November, we're doing Saturday tours at 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. by advanced registration only, just to keep things socially distanced and limited. And then we're doing another virtual Zoom. Unfortunately, it's not with Ramon, although Ramon, we welcome you to come because you're just wonderful. But we're doing that with Willistown Conservation Trust, who's a local conservation group in the area. And we're kind of exploring the story of how preservation and conservation work together in Willistown. And then finally, we are delighted to be on Roundup at the Register at Kimberton Whole Foods, so that we can you know, share our message to everyone who shops there and have some additional donations to support our programs and work. So we're excited to really be on that. So anyway, I rushed through those because Ramon, you were right. You had tons of questions at the end. It is 8:02, but we do welcome you to, you know, ask Ramon any questions that you have. I have his contact info on the screen there, and I also shared it in the chat. He's available on Instagram, on YouTube. He's got some wonderful videos if you kind of want some intro stuff. And then you can come out to a workshop if you want to, or take one live online. He's also got a website and his email address is there. And of course, if you have any questions for us about the village, Heather and I are always willing to answer questions about, you know, the bindery is one wonderful part of our village, but we have so much more going on. So we're always willing to talk about everything else we have going on. And so I hope that we gave you a taste of what we have going on in the bindery, and that you want to know more. And if anybody wants more of Ramon, I'm thinking I could make this into a series. Just Ramon, tell us more about yourself and give us give us another hour of your life. So, but please, you can send more stuff in the chat, or send, and we'll try and get it to Ramon after this. This has also been recorded, so we'll be sharing this hopefully on YouTube. And I just want to thank you all for coming. Any last questions or comments, you can throw them out now. I just want to thank Ramon again. Thank Heather so much. We've got so many kudos for you, Ramon, in the chat. I'm not sure you're seeing them, but there's so many kudos. You did great. You got an Uncle Ramon. Melissa said you did great.
Hey, Melissa.
But yeah, I want to thank you all for coming.
Thank Ramon and Faith too. They've worked really hard on this. I stepped in the later stages after they had already been talking about all their questions that they were going to go over, and old pictures of Ramon I shouldn't say old pictures of Ramon, but pictures of Ramon from Colonial Williamsburg and so forth. So it was a lot of fun to see all this come together, and I look forward to hearing more as we go along. So it's always a joy to work with Ramon and Faith.
Oh, Jack, you're raising your hand.
I was just going to make one comment. I mean, this would be, well, just so everybody knows, my father was one of the founders of Historic Sugartown, and he loved these books. And boy, he would just be so tickled and thrilled to see the response to this, and just to see this bookbinding, trade continued onward. It would make him very happy. I hope he's smiling somewhere, because it has just been wonderful. Very great presentation. Thank you so much, Ramon.
Thanks, Jack. I'm sure he's looking down, and he's very happy. And,
yes.
And by the way, Jack is the president of the board here at Sugartown.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Jack. That means a lot to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Well, it's 8:06, so I've kept you 5 minutes longer than I promised. So I will let you all go. But we are just so excited that you all joined us. Again, feel free to contact us later if a question comes up and you're like, I want to know about that. Ramon is always so willing to answer questions and things like that. And we, of course, are as well. So I hope you guys all have a wonderful rest of your Thursday, and hopefully a wonderful weekend, and we will see you all hopefully another time. All right. Thanks so much, everyone.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us.